What's going on, guys? Andrew Piluk here, back with another video, and as you can see by the title, we are going to be talking about the Edmonton Oilers. What happened to them this season? Why are they a team that's not considered to be a contender anymore? Obviously, things can change in going into next season, which I am going to talk about, but let's just talk about this season. First of all, hopefully you like the intro. I got the video done by somebody, and I had to do the audio work, so I had to put music and sound effects on it. So let me know what you think of that. I'm also going to play around with it, make different variations and stuff like that, but hopefully you enjoyed that. But before we get into this video, I'd also like to mention, if you're new, make sure you subscribe. Love to have more hockey conversations with you. Join the squad and subscribe. Be a lot of fun. So let's get right into this video on the Edmonton Oilers and what happened to them this season. So obviously the initial reaction to all hockey fans and especially Oilers fans is, how did this team go from a Stanley Cup contender to a basement team? Because going into this season, I think you and me both watching this video would have had the Oilers at least making the playoffs and even storming into the playoffs, making an impact and possibly going after that Stanley Cup, because they were pretty close to doing it last year. I mean, not close enough, but at the same time, they had a lot of people supporting them. The team was really good. McDavid, Draisaitl, everybody was on the top of their game. And this year, while McDavid has still been good and so has Draisaitl, you know, the rest of the team hasn't really been the same. So there was a lot of injuries this year too, and that kind of was part of the reason why the Oilers weren't as good. Sekera, Klefbom, obviously, that's huge for them. Nugent Hopkins, again, another core piece, and Larson. So right there, those are guys that build your core. Of course, Klefbom didn't really have the best season even when he was healthy, but again, that could also relate to the injuries. Nugent Hopkins was good, and Larson wasn't as good as he could have been, but again, all these guys were injured, and that could have played a part in what happened. You also have to take into account what I mentioned briefly, is the fact that some players just didn't perform this year. That Lucic contract looks worse and worse every single day. At first, I was okay with the deal, and then that first season he played with the Oilers, they were good. Last season, the team just gelled well. McDavid and Lucic, you know, looked like they were okay. Obviously, Lucic was there to protect McDavid. They wanted to play together. I believe McDavid even said he wanted to play with him when he was younger. But that contract just doesn't look good. Klefbom, again, with the injuries, he wasn't as good as he could have been. And then Strome, that trade with the Islanders for Eberle, I still don't like the deal. I never will, probably. Eberle's doing good for the Islanders. Strome hasn't been as good for the Oilers, of course, and I don't think a lot of Oilers fans are impressed with the way he's played. Let me know if you think different, but hopefully next year, if he doesn't get dealt, because there has been rumors that he could get traded, that he will step it up. And I expect a guy like Klefbom as well to recover after a bad season, an injury-filled season as well. Then you had guys like Puljujarvi, Caggiula, and Kassian. Caggiula, just, I hope I'm even saying his name right. I always say it wrong apparently, but he didn't really have that big of an impact. Kassian didn't have an impact in my opinion, and Puljujarvi is going to have to take another step. It's been a slow build. I read that somewhere where it's like they're taking it slow with Puljujarvi, and I'm not sure they really want to. I think it's just because he hasn't been growing at the pace that they figured he would. And by growing, I mean like as a player, putting up points, and maybe even putting on size in the gym. But at the same time, he just didn't play as good as he could have this year. I'm a fan of him. I'm not trying to get, you know, mad at him or anything like that. I'm not an Oilers fan. I do like the team. One of my favorite teams in the NHL for sure. But he just didn't perform, and that's just how it goes. You know, there was some good bright spots this year. I mean, McDavid, you know, he's just going to win the scoring race. He's still McDavid. Next year, he's going to be the same player. He's incredible. Arguably the best player in the league along with Sidney Crosby. He was good again this year. Draisaitl also had a bit of injury trouble. I believe it was towards the beginning of the season. But, you know, he was putting up a lot of points when he came back, and he's probably going to be fine next year. He's going to put up more points. Him and McDavid always do, so I'm not really worried about those two for sure. Like I mentioned before, Jesse Puljujarvi, or Jesse Puljujarvi, however the heck you want to say it, because I've heard it a billion different ways at this point, he's going to have to take another step. And that's something the Oilers are really going to focus on next season, because they're going to need him to play good. The cap situation for the Oilers is not going to be too great after, probably next year and the year after isn't going to be too good, especially with all the big contracts that they have. for bringing in more players past next season because of the McDavid deal, Draisaitl, Lucic, Nugent Hopkins. All these guys have big contracts. So fitting in guys who aren't as aren't as much money, a guy like Puljujarvi who's still on his entry-level deal, it's going to be huge for him to get some points because the Oilers are going to need to fill their roster with guys who cost a little bit less around guys who are already big name guys, big contract guys, because they're probably going to be looking at adding one more big contract, maybe shedding a big contract, because they're going to need some defensemen. They're going to need to bring in somebody else to help this Oilers team, whether it's a forward. I'm hoping it's on the back end, but it could be another forward. But yeah, Puljujarvi's definitely going to have to play better. You also have a guy like Nugent Hopkins, who out of all of the Oilers players probably has the best value for trade right now, along with Klefbom. Realistically, we know McDavid and Draisaitl and those guys aren't getting dealt. But out of the names that have been tossed around, Nugent Hopkins and Klefbom, which I don't think they're going to get rid of Klefbom, but it has been discussed to add a forward need. But even though they need defensemen, I'm not sure how that would work. But Nugent Hopkins is a guy who does have a fairly big contract, and could come back next year and be a great player for the Oilers, or the Oilers could flip him for another need like a defenseman, because they don't want Nugent Hopkins playing as their third line center, getting paid as much as he is, and playing the wing. Nugent Hopkins is not a winger. He needs to play center. That's what he's here for. But the fact of the matter is they might have to move him because of how big his contract is. They might need to grab another defenseman in free agency, spend that money somewhere else, and maybe they acquire something else for Nugent Hopkins that is maybe a lower cost defenseman and a pick or something. That would be ideal, and then pick up another defenseman in free agency. You're losing some forward points, but there's no I don't want to say consistency, but there's no guarantee that Nugent Hopkins is going to have another pretty good year like he did this year, because he's kind of been hot and cold. Ty Rattie and Ethan Bear look like guys that are going to slide into the Oilers lineup next year, and I consider that a bright spot. They both have been good playing with the Oilers towards the end of the season, and I look forward to them cracking the roster next year, because I feel like, again, like I mentioned, you're going to need some guys that don't cost as much on your cap, that are going to be able to play in your lineup and produce for you. And it looks like Ty Rattie and Ethan Bear are making the most of their opportunity, and hopefully they will stick around, because I think they're going to need guys like that. And the next point I wanted to bring up was Talbot. He didn't have the best year this year, but he also was pretty good because of the fact that he was given so many games to play. The guy was overworked. They need another backup who will be able to come in, step in, and win some games for them, kind of like Curtis McElhinney has done for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I'm not just using that because I'm a Leaf fan. Go look at his numbers. He's been very good for the Leafs this year. His save percentage is up near .935 or something like that, and his goals against is like 2.12 maybe. He's been fantastic. The Oilers need a guy who can come in and win a bunch of games for them, and let Talbot take a bit of a breather, because he doesn't want to be too overworked, because then you're going to get into a situation where Talbot's going to be overworked, exhausted, and he's not going to be able to play for you if you do end up making the playoffs. He's going to look worse in the playoffs. And I know last year he was, had a heavy workload and was fantastic all year, but look at what it's done to him this year. It's not treating him as good as last season, because the team also hasn't been that good. So they're going to have to look for a backup for sure. The next point I wanted to make was Chiarelli. Is this guy on his last leg? Because I think he is. This offseason might be the most important offseason of his entire career as a GM in the entire National Hockey League. He needs to make sure that he makes the right moves this year. He's obviously made some big moves in his career. He's not afraid to make them. He's made a lot of dumb moves. And I'm sorry, I still don't like the Larson deal, and obviously it looks even worse, but I've been on that bandwagon since day one. Last year I was like, oh, okay, maybe this works a little bit. They're in the playoffs still. Larson looks okay, but from day one, I always said this Taylor Hall deal just doesn't look great for them. It still doesn't. I know the money situation wasn't great, but Taylor Hall looks fantastic, and Larson doesn't. I know he dealt with some injuries, but he's going to need to take another step up next season. And then obviously the Strome deal didn't look too good. Chiarelli really needs to make some big moves this year. It could be in free agency. Hey, maybe they go after JVR to put on McDavid's wing for some more scoring. That I feel like that could work, but they are going to have to dip into the defensive market, because Chiarelli needs to do something, because they really need to make a move. And hey, what if they win the draft lottery? A lot of people don't want to think about that, but if they do end up winning the draft lottery, it's going to make the situation in Edmonton a lot easier if they take Dahlin with the first pick overall. McDavid and Rasmus Dahlin on the ice at the same time, especially on a 3-on-3. Could you imagine that? This team would be even better. You add Dahlin, you add another defenseman in free agency, possibly get another forward in free agency or via trade. You never know. This team could be right back into it, and I feel like next year with a healthy roster, with their young guys taking another step, Chiarelli making the right moves in the offseason, and maybe even getting a really good draft pick, this team could be right back into the playoffs and in Stanley Cup contention. So let me know what you guys think. If you want to see more videos like this, please let me know. Hopefully you guys like the intro, and yeah, if you're new, make sure you subscribe. Love to have more hockey conversations with you. Join the squad. There's going to be lots of videos and streams coming up for the playoffs especially. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.